Welcome to Cognitive Vigilance Podcast. I am here with Kyle, Rin, and Rollo Tomasi, the godfather of the Red Pill and the writer of The Rational Male, which I've been reading and I have notes.
Wow, I'm impressed. There's actually a book there.
She came correct.
Something today.
So I really wanted to start this off because I do think, even when I first heard about the Red Pill, of course, I thought of Andrew Tate, like the main ones that are the most noisy, I guess. And I was a little confused of what it was. And in particular, so I don't know how you feel about this person, but this is her explanation of what the Red Pill is, and I want to know if you think she does it justice or not.
Funny, I've never seen that movie. I've heard this term, but like it means like men are told one thing about women and like how to be, so they're like, be nice to her, treat her like a queen, da 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 da. And women don't actually want that. Like, we don't really like guys that put us on pedestals. I think sometimes we think we do, but we don't. And so it's like men basically seeing the world for what it really is.
So is that basically the Red Pill?
No.
Okay.
Believe it or not, the Red Pill does not begin and end with Andrew Tate and Pearl Davis. So.
Yeah. I figured that out finally, but
like this recent creation from like 2020, and here we are in 2020. I'll just give you a little bit of background about myself first. Is I've been doing this and writing what I've been doing for about 22 years now. So the book that you have in your hand just passed 10 years. So that's been the 10-year anniversary is this year. Yeah. And I also am the author of 5 books, not just one, because a lot of people think that that's the only book that I have. It's actually part 1 of a 5-book series. I have issues with Pearl. I have issues with Andrew Tate. I have issues with a lot of people. Just sort of like who's the best representative of the quote unquote Red Pill. But no, she's basically parroting back whatever she's heard from somebody else, more or less. No, we used to call we didn't even call it the Red Pill back in like say the mid 2000s. A lot of what we talk about today, or we think of as sort of like we just kind of take for granted, just like these maxims and these like jingoisms and stuff like that, really began right around the 2002, 2004, somewhere in there. And those were the forum years before we had like social media and YouTube was what it is now. And it was just, the mass media that is like social media right now was not what it is today. So those were the forum years. And in the forum years, I was part of a forum called the SOSWA Forum, which is still there today, by the way, 22 some odd years later. And that's where a lot of these discussions, we just basically, it was guys getting together for the first time really in history, sharing notes about like, how are things, how do you pick up girls in South Africa or Mumbai or wherever the hell you are in the world. And so it was like sort of this like aggregate of guys coming together and just sort of collectively sharing notes. And as a result of that, we used to start calling it unplugging from the matrix. And it was just a colloquialism, I guess, that we were using in the forums at that time. And I have the very first time I used the term Red Pill was December 29th or 27th, something like that, 2004. So I have I went back and looked in my forum posts to see what the earliest instance was of me using that term. So the Red Pill by my book is the praxeology of intersexual dynamics. That's the easiest way I can describe it. So it's not a belief system. It's not it's just truth versus like what you used to believe. I mean, because that's really kind of the problem with a lot of the people who like want to use or appropriate the term Red Pill. And it usually happens right around election cycles for the United States. Because you'll see like more sort of conservatives want to pick up on the quote unquote Red Pill. They did the same thing in 2015, 2016, 2020 as well. And now you're seeing it come back around in 2024. A lot of people don't know this, but Candace Owens from the Daily Wire, she used to be on Twitter and her handle used to be Red Pill Black. And so that's what I mean by like appropriating it. And really what people like Andrew Tate and Pearl have done is just sort of jumped on board what they think is a popular brand or popular term, so that they can just use it as, a hashtag or a tag in their videos or whatever else. And really what they are is just sort of regurgitating and parroting back a lot of the stuff that's been going around, really, since at least 2004, as far as I'm concerned. But it's the praxeology of intersexual dynamics. And is it understanding things how they were, like what your church and what your society and what pop culture and music and everything else has taught you, and does that like sort of keep you in like a quote unquote matrix? Yes. And is it breaking out of that? Yes, but it's much more than that.
So is there a connection to like pickup artists? Was that was because I read The Game by Neil Strauss too, and like all of that. Is that like a connection to this?
Yes, absolutely. That was it was born out of the So Suave forums, which are really more like dating, relationship, and it covers pickup as well. But it kind of falls under what we now kind of call game. And when I refer to game, I'm not really talking about it in terms of like pickup artistry, like Mystery Method and stuff like that. Game, at least to me anyways, is like a set of social skills, like being able to sort of relate, not necessarily, obviously with women, but also like just in general, I think being able to relate and have relationships like with men and women and just have like the basic social skills that you need. Does that translate into intersexual social skills? Yes. So as far as game is concerned, it's sort of understanding social cues. It's understanding body language. It's understanding like being a good conversationalist, which are really kind of sorely lacking in this latest generation. So I think everybody sort of picks up on it and they say, oh, that's just those pickup artist guys. They just want to get their dick wet. And it's like, no, you're talking about, by the way, the Game, published in 2005. All the stories in the Game happened between 2002 and like 2004. So we're talking 20 years ago. So looking back, it's kind of like saying, oh yeah, I love oldies rock and roll or something like that. Because it's all the stuff that went on back in the mid 2000s with like say Mystery and Neil Strauss and them, when wearing like sharkskin suits and top hats and feather boas and black nail polish.
Yeah, I remember all that. That's how I learned about neuro-linguistic programming.
Yeah. Oh yeah. If your mental image of a PUA is like Mystery with elevator boots and big old digital sign on his shirt, that was like 18-20 years ago. So it's time to update your software.
So this is something I've been really interested in, as I have very little background on a lot of this, and I've been kind of taking the red pill journey and trying to learn and understand and apply it to my own sort of like, I'm very like non-traditional relationship styles, and my journey through all of this has been very not the typical kind of route, but I still interact with a lot of like young men in the community. Do you have a kind of like elevator pitch or like a couple of core axioms that you would like, these are the important things,
I get this all the time. In fact, I was just on the Danza Project about a couple of weeks ago with my co-host, Mike Sartain. For people who don't know, I do a show called Access Vegas every other week in Las Vegas with Michael Sartain. But he asked the same question. He says, is there like an elevator pitch for the rep? I'm like, no, because it's like a college fucking course is what it is. It's like, it's a college major is what it is. It's not like just a bumper sticker you can put on your car and say, I'm red pill. I would say if there is a simpler way to put it, I would say that the red pill is the praxeology of intersexual dynamics. And if you don't know what praxeology is, a lot of people will say, well, oh, that's you borrowed that from what Mises or something like. It's like some sort of economic kind of thing.
Ludwig von Mises, my man. We know who he is.
Well, at least Brady and I are.
So, by the way, so you're not incorrect. That is a praxeology.
Yeah.
Well, I'm talking about praxeology in the Greek term it's the study of human behavior, in that human behavior has a purpose. Like there's like a motivation behind it. So it locks in really well with evolutionary psychology. So really what the red pill in its most purest form is it's like the Chilton manual for intersexual dynamics. If you know what a Chilton manual is, it's like the car. If you have a car like a 1968 VW Bug, you get a Chilton manual and it shows you like what every damn part is, how it goes together and all that stuff. It doesn't tell you how to drive the car. It doesn't say what the fuel economy is. It doesn't give you this. It just says, here's the parts, put it back together, tear it apart, whatever you want to do. So like, I'm sure Ryan Stone, when he was on here with you guys, probably explained this similarly. Is that it's not it's amoral, it's a-religious, it's a-racial, there's no belief set, there's no red pill movement, there is no red pill philosophy, there is no red pill cult, belief set, ideology, whatever. It is what it is. Like it's just basically, here is objective truth. This is what we're looking for. Like I told, if you want an elevator pitch, I would say that the red pill also has to include, and I'm stealing this line from Gad Saad, just so everyone knows, but I have an obligation to objective truth. And so looking at how the car is put together, the intersexual dynamics car is put together in the Chilton Manual, great. Does that mean we have the whole Chilton Manual all ready to go? No, but some parts are missing, right? We're still putting those chapters in and those parts in, but we have enough of it to create a predictive framework, and that's really where it goes. And the problem with that is once you have the Chilton Manual and you have the praxeology or enough of it there, what happens is you have kind of disingenuous actors come in and they want to sort of turn it into a commercial enterprise, which is exactly what you see going on with Andrew Tate and with Pearl and with Kevin Samuels and with Byron and Fresh, Fresh and Fit. Some do a better job at it than others. No, not give them their due. Myron and Fresh and Fit. I've been a part of that show since the inception of it. So, but
God, they do drive me insane. But Myron, Myron especially.
So here's there's the delivery of it, and then there's like the actual praxeology, like what is behind all that, like what's the guts, what's the meat to it all.
Do you think that he's doing it correctly? Because I feel like he isn't. I feel like a lot of what he's saying is not based on it might have a little bit of that, but a lot of it feels like it's his emotional responses to things and to women.
I mean, part of it is holding women accountable. Right?
I get
a lot of guys are looking for the indignation.
Because that's what the audience like. Oh, remember the show's almost 3 years old, and I can people don't know I was actually there on the first time he did a quote unquote Frank Castling, but it was off screen. It was before the show started. I was supposed to go on with some lawyer chick and some other one of her friends or something like that. And I think the episode's still up, but I was on there and this lawyer girl or psychologist, somebody brought in a friend of hers, and her friend started mouthing off to Myron before the show started. And he's like, well, I want the quality of the show has to be perfect, blah, blah, blah. You get the fuck out, right? Before the show started. So nobody even knows that happened. After the show was done, I go, dude, you should have just let that happen live on the air. And thus the castling was born right there. And so, because that's that Maury Povich kind of like, it's like NASCAR. Nobody goes to watch the winner. They watched it for the car wreck is what they're looking for.
Well, yeah. And the Whatever podcast is the same thing, right? Exactly. It's just, you're watching, it's all for that clip of what I dislike is that it does seem to focus on making the girls look stupid. And everyone's like, oh, well, they're not making them look stupid. They are doing that themselves, but it feels like there's not a lot of variety on the women that they have on. Typically, it does feel like there is like a stereotype.
I mean, so like to Fresh and Fit's credit, they do keep they do keep track of all the women that they have, and it's not like they just get them from Miami. They don't just coming from all over the place.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. I have the actual stats if you want me to read them to you.
I understand because like it is definitely clickbait and entertainment, but
like
I think some of that is value added. So like
well, it has to be because so you're not. So here's what I have the stats if you want them. They've got over like 1,600 female guests. 938 are originally from the state from other states. 148 are from countries outside of the USA. New York and California seems to be where the most girls are from. Texas, Georgia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Massachusetts, Colorado, DC, and Nevada, probably Vegas. New stats, 337 of the female guests are actually from Florida, of that like 1,600. And so they keep very meticulous records of this because like the first questions they ask, like, where are you from? What's your highest level of education? Are you single? Blah, blah, blah. And so when people say they throw the accusation at them that like they're just cherry picking these girls to make them look stupid, it's like, no, that's who they brought in for. Like, it's Miami. People vacation there. Like the girls like will come in from the state because they want to be on that show because they know that if they do, whatever their funnel marketing is, whether it's Instagram or OnlyFans or whatever else.
Well, it's usually OnlyFans, right?
Yeah, for more or less. But it's I mean, occasionally they'll have women that don't have it. But I mean, they've had women as young as like, say, 19 on there. and as old as like 42 or 43. So like unless you're like watching it all the time and you know stuff like that, it's easy to kind of say, well, oh, they're just trying to make them look dumb. And I'm like, no, they're really not.
Some women are that dumb.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I agree. So, no, women, I'm not saying that the women aren't dumb, actually, but I actually think they might be, but I do think it is a particular demographic of women that think that way. And especially if the majority of them, I hate to say this, like, are young, under the age of 25, do OnlyFans. Like, I think that is a particular demographic that is going to have a particular mindset.
Right.
That might make them look retarded.
Self-selecting feature that's going on there.
But one thing that I think you guys should take note of is that, like, literally just this week, I found out that a girl that, like, I used to hang out with, and I'm in rural Pennsylvania, had an OnlyFans. So, I mean, like, this shit is everywhere. Like, you shouldn't think that it's, like, just local to Miami, New York City, California, whatever. Like, this shit is spreading, and I mean, you know,
I was just reading. I was reading some summations of like OnlyFans, because OnlyFans really started to pick up during the the COVID years, during 2020.
I wonder why.
It was of course, but it was
necessity.
It was a thing in 2019, but it really came into its own in 2020, obviously. And so now you're seeing women who are. I mean, I have been on shows like on Adam Sosnick's show on Saucecast, seated next to women who used to be like surgical nurses who quit that job because they made more money as an OnlyFans, paying their husband on OnlyFans. They're millions
to the streets.
So like she goes to school to med school for like 8 years so she can become a surgical nurse. And yet she's like, fuck it, I'll be an OnlyFans. I don't, because it's more lucrative for her. Like, why wouldn't you do that? You send your kids to private schools, you get to drive nice cars. It's like, why wouldn't you do something like that? And I think that, I mean, we're going to end up reaching a saturation point with this.
I think we already have.
The numbers are really, most people on OnlyFans make a few $100.
Yeah, they don't make that much. The average user, I think, is like something like $150 or $165, something like that. But then I always, more to your point, though, Brandy, is that like I tell, like one of the reasons why we put Access Vegas together with the express purpose of not kicking the girls off and actually having good conversations. But Mike Sartain knows some of the most beautiful women on planet Earth, so that's also the draw there. But most of the women there we have women who have PhDs. We have women who have they're multimillionaires in real estate. We've had two different Miss Nevada's on. We have very and we make a point every time we introduce the girls of saying we don't have dumb chicks on here. Like we're gonna have a conversation here. And the problem with that is like we run into this problem in that people think we're too soft on them and that we don't punch them in the face. Like, oh, get them off of there. How did don't let her say that. You guys are weak. That kind of stuff. It's like, no, because we're a different show. We're trying to actually have a conversation with these women and so it's not just for them, it's just so like our audience can be educated as well. So like my point of doing my show and doing Access Vegas as well is it's kind of like sizzle and steak. It's like there's got to be some nutritional value to the show, but you also have to have sizzle, and you got to have like the hot girls and big tits and red flaming boobs so
I've watched your show a lot, and I actually like yours better than Fresh and Fit and whatever podcast. I've enjoyed it, and I do think there's a little bit more variety and personality, and the content. It feels more good faith. It feels like more of a good faith conversation and less of condescending douchebags. Like I described whatever podcast, it feels like school bullies picking on like the kids with special needs, like that's what it feels like. They're just like, so these like young girls are so oblivious and have no idea. And all these dudes are like in their 30s and are just like, these girls just have no concept of like what they're even saying, and it feels like there's a little bit of like gaslighting and stuff going on. I feel like yours doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, well, I mean, we did that with that express purpose in mind. So people want to say, "Oh, you guys are just trying to do the Fresh and Fit formula." I'm like, well, yeah, but we are, and they've come on our show. They've done their show in our studio. We've gone there, of course. I mean, we definitely have collabs with them, of course. And like I said, I've been involved with Fresh and Fit since the beginning. And as far as I know, we're the only show of the same sort of theme that they're willing to do that with. So we've got a good relationship. And I mean, Myron used to be part of my other group, Rule Zero, which Ryan is in as well. And so I've known Myron for quite some time, and I've just seen the progression. I think that of the people who are out there right now, I think he's probably the best representative of the red pill as far as I'm concerned right now. But the delivery is really what
you think Myron is?
Well, I think he knows his shit. But here's when you'll see it: when you see him on Tim Pool, when you see him on Mike Rashid, when you see him on Steven Crowder, when you see him like outside of the after hours show, and he's having conversations like what was the one he did with that girl in Britain not too long ago? I can't remember. Shiana something or other. But anyways, it was a show that they were doing in Great Britain. He was on point. You know, he's much more intelligible, I guess, in that format as opposed to like being on his show, which he understands his audience and he understands what they want. They want blood. You know, it's bread and circuses. They really want. And so after a while, you kind of start, playing to that audience because it's sort of like most like podcasts run into like lifestyle creep. Like, okay, now we have to sort of play to an audience rather than just do what the fuck we want to do or that we think is fun to do.
Yeah,
Does that do a disservice? I'm sorry, go ahead, Kyle.
No. Like if you look at a lot of YouTube now, generally like all the informational podcasts that I put out on my other podcast are generally like they don't get as many views as like the ones that are with a guest where we're talking about spicy topics. So like whenever I try to provide people nutritional information that's going to make their lives better, nobody gives a shit about that. But as soon as you see people getting clowned, everybody can't wait to click on that.
Yeah, because it's Twitch kids, man. The Twitch kids love that shit. It is like if you think about the demographic, like 18 to 24. What do they? They want to follow Aiden Ross. They want to follow Josh Donahue or somewhere. It's this sort of like juvenile adolescent social skill set that you're sort of having to sort of pander to if you want to get some sort of you want to get some traction, and especially if you're starting a new podcast right now. But yeah, I feel like because I think that's one of the reasons why we've been kind of like we've been very steady in our growth on Access Vegas, but again, it's that nutritional value. And when you can even see this in Fresh and Fit, if you go and you look at the interviews that they do of me or of anybody else, those are way lower viewership than the after hour show, which are always in the hundreds of thousands.
Kick this 304 off.
If they have like me or Ryan Taraban on there, they might do 75. Maybe with me they'll get 100, right? But they generally are somewhere between 50 and 100. Whereas if you look at the rest of their shows, it really depends. Is John Zerka on? Is Destiny on? Is somebody gonna throw punches? Then that's a highly viewed show. So, and it's just the nature of the beast. And so my eternal frustration is having like what I call a pod class. Like on Sundays, I do a pod class. So I'm trying to give people like information, but the problem with giving information, and maybe you guys have run into this as well, is
I have.
You can't tell people like praxeology. You can't tell them data and information and stats and everything without telling people how to feel about it. Because if you don't tell them how to feel about it, they will hate you for that. They will think, why are you telling me this? Do you think I need to know this? Is there something wrong with me? Or are you telling me, I believe in God. Don't you believe in God? It'll be this back and forth. And are you a bad person? You must be a bad person for telling me this, because you're not giving them sort of the emotional rush or whatever it is that they need. And if it's something that aligns with, like, say, their belief set or their emotional investments, then they're cool with it. But if you don't tell people how to feel about data, then they'll make it up for themselves. And usually it's, you're a dick.
So I do want to jump into that. That's really interesting. Talking about Fresh and Fit playing to their audience and like being good representative of Red Pill in other areas, but on the own show, is that almost like a disservice to the praxeology itself?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, Pearl Davis is a blemish on the Red Pill praxeology.
Sure, that's totally fair. It's just what could Fresh and Fit do to try to have a better interpretation of the praxeology while still holding entertainment?
Hard, yeah. It's a balance that's really difficult.
I don't know. I actually just think he's a dick, but that's just my personal opinion.
That's what everybody thinks too. And I'll tell you this, Brandy, it's like you're not the first girl, you're not the first woman to tell me that too. I mean, there's the Myron that I know that's in the moment and on the show, and then there's Myron I know who's off the camera as well.
So are you saying it's an act?
I think it's an act. I think it's really like he's been doing this for so long that he knows what to expect, and it's almost like he's anticipating what's coming next. There comes, like, you'll notice this in most of these shows, not just, it's Myron Fresh for sure. It's on Fresh and Fit, but also on whatever podcast, Pearl's show. Hell, you could even do it on Access Vegas, but there comes a point of what we call the diminishing returns, right? You're building up. It's like usually within the first, hour, maybe hour and 15, 20. And then it's you kind of hit the peak, and then you kind of reach diminishing returns, and then you get like negative returns after that if you keep going. So the point of diminishing returns is usually when the second or third White Claw kicks in for the girls.
Like this is something that I've seen him talk about a lot, though. What Meredith just said, doesn't care about getting his sexual partners off. Like he does say that all the time. Like
okay, so like Rhinestone put this in a way that I thought was actually pretty funny. Is that your pleasure is your problem, right? And I'm not. It's not to say you shouldn't satisfy a woman, but like if your entire goal is that, then like
I do
that
somewhat
kind of
agree with
defines
that.
Red Pill. Right, like
It's so fascinating.
One principal point of Red Pill is to you're your own frame, right? Mental point of origin, where you're supposed to be focused on yourself. So it's not to say like you should be a dick.
I'm glad you know that, Kyle.
No, dude, I've read the books, so like you should be your own mental point of origin. But that doesn't mean you should say just fuck everybody else. Like if you have a wife or a girlfriend, you should want that person to be happy, but they should be happy because you're so focused on yourself and you're able to provide for them in a serious way.
Yeah, but it sounds good to a 18 to 24-year-old demographic where it's like, yeah, look, Dad, I'm gonna get mine. That's
yeah, I guess.
It's, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. It was like I think it was back in 2018, 2019. It might still be around, but it was in the Reddit. It's on Reddit. It's a Reddit subforum called Pro Revenge, and it's it's called Pro Revenge. I wrote an essay about it when I first discovered it, but it's not okay. For the most part, it's like, oh, my girlfriend broke up with me, and then I won the lottery the next day, and haha, she got hers. Fuck her, that karma kind of thing.
There's a lot of guys that are like that, and I
absolutely,
deal with them all the
absolutely.
time.
But
and I try to tell them like getting zeroed out as a guy is probably a good thing because in theory it should red pill you until you like the nature of women is that they don't care. They'll no matter what, women are going to win. You need to win for you. You don't need to win so that you can get women. You need to win for yourself. So what that is
a form of what I call best practices. Okay. That is not red pill. That is a practice. You're saying this is what you should do with this information. So when Myron says, oh, you shouldn't go down on a girl because that's simpish beta bullshit behavior.
Vaginas are disgusting. Direct quote.
I'm like, I disagree with that. I heartily disagree with. Or the other one was, high value men should cheat. Should. In italics and a bold italics, should. No, that's a practice. That's saying that this is what you ought to do. And that's not red pill. It's here's the information. If you're taking that and you're saying, okay, well, based on this information, I think I should not go down on my girlfriend. I think I should be able to have a main chick and many side pieces, right? That's not red pill. That is whatever the guy who's the guru or the practitioner of that who's giving you advice. So like whenever I go and I throw something out there, people will go and they'll look at if you haven't read the book already, the 9 Iron Rules of Tomasi. People love numbers. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like 12 rules for life.
I was just gonna say 12 rules for life.
And here's 7 hot tips to keep your marriage spicy. And number 4 will surprise you, And it's like people love to have a process, even whether they follow it or they don't. They want to think that at least, hey, now I know where to go once I have this problem, so I'll be able to sort it out for myself, even though they never read the damn thing. But when I did the 9 Iron Rules of Tomasi, I look at that more as like the 48 Laws of Power. 48 Laws of Power is not like a cookbook. It's not like a recipe to a good life. These are just numbered 1 through 48. These are some rules of power. They're not saying use these as a best practices because some of those are pretty unethical, right?
Kind of like art of seduction. Like I love Robert Greene. So
stuff, yeah.
But it's not. They're not telling you what to do exactly.
They're giving you the information and allowing you to decide what to do with it.
I guess that's probably why your content is more palatable to me, even though there are some times where I'm like, I don't know if I agree with that. It's more palatable to me than that other type where it feels like they are telling people what to do. And it's probably because I think that it's not great advice for everyone. It's like, so Rin, he's polyamorous, but he doesn't go around telling everyone, my lifestyle is amazing and everyone should be polyamorous,
I encourage people not to do it because it's not for most people.
Yeah, more for me. I remember when Kevin Samuels was popularizing this idea that high value men like deserved or should cheat, right? And I'm like, well, I guess I'm not a high value guy because I've been married for, well, now 27 years, right? And I have a kid. And now, of course, all the people who are like shitting all over guys like me like 3 years ago, now they've got secret children and secret wives, and they want to be like,
Fuck trophies for
traditional.
clout.
Yeah, exactly. They want to
changed. Yeah.
Suddenly they pivot to this like tradcon, lifestyle. Oh, we've always been like this. Like, bullshit. You used to give me and Ryan so much shit for being married. Well, he has a common law wife, but like, for the longest, oh, where's your receipts? Well, where the fuck are your receipts? Oh, now I've got receipts because I got a secret kid and I got like, secret wives and stuff like that. But but again, that's part of the grift. That's part of the best practices. Those are the people who want to take the information there and sort of bastardize it and just twist it to be a commercial product and turn it into their, personalized brand. And I think that does a disservice. I think Pearl's probably the biggest culprit of all this, at least right now. But there's others. I mean, there's several others, but I think that as far as sort of I hate to say keeping it pure, but like if you've read my books, you understand. Like I usually say this in the introduction of the books, I'm not in the business of making men better men. I'm in the business of giving men the equipment and the information, the education, the tools that they need to make themselves better men. Like that means more to me. Like when people say, I want to see what your work is, like show me the work that you did. I can give you the paintbrush and I can give you the palette knife and the paints and I can give you an easel and I can give you all this great shit, but you're still the canvas and you get to paint and use all those tools that I gave you. I'm like, show me what you did. Show me the masterpiece that you came up with, because I'm not looking for Tomasi guys. I don't want to start a cult. I never have wanted to. I just wanted to put this information in a palatable way, digestible way, and articulate it in such that people could understand it and then use it for their own benefit. And here we are 10 years later, and it's been pretty successful.
So this is actually something we talked about with Ryan when he was on. If the purveyors of the praxeology have audiences that are disproportionately turning out to be the opposite of the better men you're hoping for, is there any sort of like, is there like an internal reflection system for these people who are, interpreting the praxeology, handing it out to the people from the soapbox? And, like one of the episodes before, Brandy, we were talking about how young men are coming out very like aggressive towards women. And it's like, you're getting a lot of this. How can we not necessarily repackage, but are there almost like moral safeguards or like, like the bumper lanes?
Should they be? Yeah. I can remember I had I think it was Dr. Sean Smith asked me this. Cause like, I think once he kind of wrapped his head around the red pill as being a sort of a praxeology, he says, do you think that these guys are ready to be like, unplugged from like, should some of these guys? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. Not everybody is ready. Like all of these guys are not prepared for this stuff. And I remember it was like one of the first episodes I was on Myron and Fresh. It was March of 2021. And they asked me this question. They said, do you think that the red pill is going mainstream? And I go, I hope not. I hope it isn't. Because then it ceases to be the red pill, then it ceases to be something that's like, something that's actually honest and genuine, that's there to help. Because I got to say that, a lot of the stuff that I go into and a lot of the, Ryan and Mike and the rest of us really kind of dig into, it can be really hard for people who aren't prepared for it. So especially like people who are very invested in their like ego investments, right? Their belief sets. If they're very super religious or if they're very ideological, they'll pick and pull the parts of the red pill that like align with that. And then they are very adamantly against whatever it is that might like line up against it. And so it's kind of like there's a demographic of guys that are very kind of conflicted about it. And then there's the guys who just, like you're saying, there's guys who are just very aggressive, right? They'll take that, because what they're doing is they're taking that information, they're taking that red pill praxeological education equipment, tools and stuff, and then they're applying it in their own, the practice of it, the game of it, whatever. And they're using it like they would with their adolescent social skill sets. Like that's what they think is what's going to be a best practice for them. And then there's the other guys who just get completely despondent and nihilistic about it.
Yeah.
And those typically are the who cares, go your own way, just stay home, jerk off, play video games and order Uber Eats and smoke weed.
Get a sex doll. Well, I know a guy that is like this. That's ordering a sex doll because
one thing is whenever those stories crop
he loves you, by the way.
They go, that pill. those guys always say incels are great and you should be an incel, or you should get a vasectomy, or you should go and fuck 10 or 50 women before you get married. That's what everybody thinks, that like I'm the one that I'm like the cleanup crew. I have to go and clean up everybody's mess. When people ask me like, well, you guys say this all the time and the philosophy is this. I'm like, dude, just slow your roll, man. Let me tell you what it's really about. And people just don't have the patience or the time to with that, especially this age.
Is there a way to package that? Sorry, Kyle, but is there, because this is something I'm like working with in my general community. Like, is there a way to package aspects of the praxeology to help counter that, right? Like, so this it's very tempting, I think, in a way that's very parallel to like a lot of like religious extremism, right? You can take messages that sound great and you can push people to a more kind of like, so what is the counter to that? Like, how do you use red pill framework to? It's
happening already, whether we want it or not. My answer to that would be like, I can write some very detailed and very, object oriented books and say, here's like, for instance, I can say, no, you shouldn't be an incel. You need to cross the abyss so that you go from your old sort of blue pill life into like this red pill paradigm where you realize you have more opportunity knowing, having accurate information than you did before, and all the bullshit, goals and dreams and Disney fantasies you had when you were in the blue pill, that needs to be cast off, and you need to sort of create and do something new for yourself. Most people don't have that sort of level of creativity to help their discontent. But the idea, at least in my terms, is to sort of like educate people, do shows, to speak it as much as I can, write it as much as I can. And hope some of it sinks in. It's like, like having kids, like when you can't tell kids anything. You can't like you could say something and maybe 10% of it sinks in, but they do watch what you do. So if you live by example, if you do this stuff, I think that the biggest sort of misconception, or the most like sort of corruption, I think, of the red pill is that people will hear something from like a Pearl or Andrew Tate, and then they'll say, you red pill guys always say X. And I'm like, where are you hearing that? On what show? Can you tell me who you're talking about? Can you name some names? And most of them can't, because they're just there just to get a rise out of whatever it is that they're doing. But I would say, is there a way to sort of corral people to sort of think, critical thinking? I try. I don't think too much. It doesn't pay very well. That's the problem. Nobody wants to buy that book.
So like,
we're trying. That's what this show is trying for. Right?
I've been going back and forth with a lot of like the Orthodox Christians, because like a lot of those people are very, very close to me, and I love a lot of those people. And I'm an agnostic, but like their criticism always is, well, red pill is too materialist. But we were talking about this a little bit before the show, and like my thing is, when you start getting into metaphysical claims, then the problem is it's so individual that like what my metaphysical claims may be different than yours or Brandy's or Rin's. So like, what is the purpose of talking about metaphysical claims in respect to the red pill, when everybody is going to be so individual on this kind of thing? So like I said, the one criticism they leveled at people who are more red pill aware, like myself, you, or Ryan, would be that like, oh well, you guys are just materialists. Well, once again, the metaphysical beliefs are going to be very individual. So I was kind of curious your thoughts on that.
Well, if your only experience of the red, quote unquote, red pill, whatever that is, right, is, like I said, begins and ends with Andrew Tate and Pearl Davis, then yeah, I can understand that. But like, I spent 3 years of my life researching and writing this fourth book, which is it's called Religion. And I did it because I had to answer this question, like as far back as like 2016, 2017. And talk to individuals, thought leaders, I guess, of religions across the world, Muslims, Jews, Christians, Sikhs, Hindus. I mean, I had that's why it's probably my most well-researched book. It has the most sources cited. I had so many people who were like influential in putting the whole thing together. And so when people say, oh, the red pill doesn't talk about religion, metaphysical things, it's materialistic, yada, yada, I would say you haven't read enough. You don't know enough about the red pill for you to even make that judgment call. Because I talk to guys all the time. Like, there are people that I reach out to who are, red pill Muslims, red pill Christians, red pill that, there's a group of guys, three guys are called the Iron Disciples. They're out of like Sarasota, Florida. And I have been really trying to help them sort of get their podcast off the ground, hang out with them, talk to them a lot. I think that their heart is in the right place. And then, like, I know Abu American. I'm still in contact with Rabbi Kaba, who is the rabbi who helped me with the Jewish part of the book. And Gad Saad, evolutionary psychologist, a Jew. So when people say that, it's like, they want to make these claims because they don't think that it's something that the red pill has thought of. It's like, well, yeah, if your experience of the red pill is only like, begins at 2019, then yeah, I understand why you would think that. But it's much deeper than that, and it goes much further than that. You just need to sort of educate yourself a little bit more. But as far as like the metaphysical side and the physical side of things, I cover exactly that topic in the book. So it's like, I spent 3 years of my life, invested 3 years of my life in this. It's like, all you got to, here, I'll just give you the one chapter. Just read the one chapter and I'll be okay with it. But it's the ortho bros really want something. I think there's a lot of sort of, it's trendy to be anti-red pill right now. Right. And so everybody has to have their sort of like individual take to be anti-red pill. So I'm dealing with guys like Date Psych and not Will Costello so much, but like Mac and Murphy and some of these other guys who are just sort of coming out of the woodwork saying, it's like dueling research studies,
I deal with that nutrition all the time.
I can show you 25 years of data on ovulatory shift and dual mating strategy from Dr. Marty Hazelton at UCLA. And they'll go, oh, I found this one research and so that blows all that 25 years out. Like, wait a minute, slow your roll. But so there's that side of it. And then there's sort of the religious side of it, the moralistic side of it. Then there's a political side of it. Then you got like the Nick Fuentes people who just want to just call you a Jew, no matter what. then you got like, the earth is flat and the moon landing never happened and fuck the red pill, right? I mean, that's pretty much, it's whatever spin you can put on it, like whatever flavor of your own that you want to put on your red pill hate. But I'm used to this, and it comes in cycles because the same thing happened in 2015, 2016, same thing happened in 2019 and 2020, and it's happening right now. You just ride it out, and then you wait for these people to come back, because as soon as that grift doesn't work for them anymore, they'll pivot back to intersexual dynamics.
I have one. Right. I have just one, because one of my actual critiques wasn't about the metaphysical side, but that it feels like it focuses a lot on like the external and like females internal. Like, you're kind of trying to understand the psychology of women and like why they do what they do, but there's not a lot of like self-reflection on why men do what they do. And like that like, it feels like, well, from what I've read, I don't know, it feels like it's with some stuff there is, I guess.
How far are you through my book right now?
I've read the first three. So there is. You're right. There is, but I guess maybe. No, you're right. There is, because I just looked. I'm at the Savior Schisma, which is like all about the Captain Save-A-Ho type of. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there is. I guess maybe I'm not talking about you in particular. I guess it's kind of.
Dude, but okay, but see,
but I know this is hard, because it's like, okay, we can, like, there's you, but then there's all the people that follow you, and then all of the people that follow them, and right. Those are all the people that fill in all the comments and are,
But what Ryan said last time is that how many, what can we do to apologize for other retards that are patronizing the red pill? I mean, there's only so much that Rolo, Ryan can do to make up for all the idiots that take up all the oxygen in the room. And this is typically what people do with group psychology, is that they'll look at a group and they'll judge it by its worst members. That's what always happens.
I went on Dr. Phil. What more do you want me to do?
Well, and so another thing I had a question on in regards to that was like, okay, do you think there's a lot of discussion on like instincts and like almost evolutionary psychology, but what about like people's upbringing and like their childhood and like the nature versus nurture discussion? Like how much does nurture have to do with this? Because I did see you post something about how women like criminals or like women are attracted to criminals, right? Yeah. And like there is truth to that. There is, but I think that a lot of women that have that instinct, it's due to actually childhood stuff, not as much nature. Like if you have a good father figure, I think you're way less likely to be attracted to criminals. And I don't know if I think that's as much of a nature thing as
Well,
more of a nurture thing.
So I put it this way, and people throw rocks at me for saying this. Not all women are hybristophiles, but only women are hybristophiles. So the propensity or the tendency for women to fall in love or be sexually aroused by and then fall in love with convicted criminals, rapists, drug, warlords, Lord of War, is a female thing. I mean, it's a very well studied, well researched phenomenon. When you have like Anders Breivik or Nicholas Cruz or was a Boston Marathon bomber kid, I forget his name, Richard Ramirez. Like you're looking at like even Jeffrey Dahmer had a teenage fan club.
Oh, I know. But wouldn't the female equivalent being the I'm in love with the stripper? I'm in love with the hooker?
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't that kind of be the male equivalent of that?
That would be true if if the stripper was a cannibal.
No, because men and women are biologically different. So I agree with the nature difference, but like from the nurture side, from what's happened from where you grew up, like the men are more likely there's usually childhood reasons for why they are attracted to women that are in that.
Not everything is a Carl Jung explainable dynamic.
Well, I love Carl Jung, so like I was waiting to be like, he hates Carl Jung, and I'm gonna try not to go all like Jungian on him.
Okay, so here you should see what Gad Saad has to say about Carl Jung.
Oh, I mean, I like him. I like Gad, but he's wrong sometimes.
Compared to Gad. No, I mean, I'll just reiterate what Gad said about Carl. He had contributions, don't get me wrong, but we live in the 21st century now. And a lot of the stuff that all of the theories and the hypotheses that he postulated back in 1930s, 1940s, well, that was almost 100 years ago now, coming up on 100 years of that. And so the idea, like we have sort of like canonized and like made Carl Jung sort of into this new age, like hippy dippy messiah. And there's been a lot of advances in psychology and evolutionary psychology, evolutionary biology. His best ideas were based on the science and the data that they had during that time. Well, we have substantially more than that today. So that's really where my starting point is with and not just Carl Jung, but like I can go.
I was going to say Freud though, because Freud also talks about childhood, like how our childhood molds us, right?
It's so here's the latest. I'll give you the latest. The latest is this: you should probably look up the 4 laws of behavioral genetics. That is you could probably find that through Steve Stewart Williams, I believe, is where I picked it up from, or you could probably get it from who else? Oh, Dr. Hector Garcia would probably be a good source as well. But the 4 laws of behavioral genetics is essentially is that our genetics are responsible for a lot more than we want to. Like the blank slate is a dead meme after our plotting of the human genome. Once we figure that out, once we understand that there are genes, or I should say there's multiple genes that contribute to behavioral factors, that contribute to criminality, contribute to IQ, contribute to so many different aspects of us, that I'm not saying that social factors and so environments make a difference, but the idea that social constructionism is in any way influential in like developing a personality is absolute horseshit. Now that we know behavioral genetics. So if you go and if you look at like,
I have some pushback on that. Okay. I'm an actual geneticist. And it's interesting because you're not wrong, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're not wrong out of base, but there's so much it's so difficult to do laboratory experiments with humans, right? Like we don't live in those environments. And some of the twin studies for behavioral genetics, there's a behavioral component for alcoholism. Like there's a genetic predisposition for alcoholism. It is 100 times less influential than something that is like you have a gene that says you have blue eyes or red eyes, right? Like if you have the right gene combinations, you're always going to have that. There's already an asterisk on that always, but
I want the red eyes one.
You know, you can play around with those things. We're coming all kinds of interesting stuff, and then you come into these like rare, like recessive, you know, diseases and things that are 100 times less than the red eye, blue eye, whatever your common, you know, those sort of like locked in stone genetics. The statistical significance for the alcoholism is another 100 times less than those like rare genetic diseases. So it's true because we've seen enough of the studies, like alcoholic parents are more likely to have alcoholic children. It's there, but that like it's really interesting how it can manifest, right? So people who have the genetic predisposition for, say, a gambling addiction, who are never exposed to gambling, will find another addiction.
Yeah, there's something else.
But those people can also become the Olympians or the, you know, because it's the obsession thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But so that's like,
yeah,
I don't know. I'm not trying to argue against what you're trying to say.
So here, let me see if I can explain. Again, I've got to go back to the Danza project because I talked about this on there. Are you right-handed or left-handed?
I love this one. All right. Yeah. So I'm right-handed.
You're right-handed. So anyways, if I asked you to sign your signature, your name with your left hand, do you think you could do it? Probably not. Probably be pretty shitty, right? But if I tied your right hand behind your back for long enough, or like you lost your arm, for God forbid, you would eventually learn how to write. You would suddenly become left-handed. You become more proficient with your left hand. Your natural proclivity from being born that way. So this is the way your brain works. I'm right-handed too. My brother's ambidextrous, right? But like, if you have a certain, you know, preference for your hands or something like that, you can learn to play like guitar left-handed. If you like, you're Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath, you cut off the tips of your fingers, and you have to learn. You're still right-handed, but you learn to play left-handed because that's the only way you could play, because you'd cut the tips of your fingers off, right? So yes. Are there environmental factors? Are there things that are that influence, like emphasize or de-emphasize certain like innate natural traits? Absolutely. But the thing is that the operative state is still what the genes are defining for that person. So if you have like I said, right-handed or left-handed, you could learn to sign your name left-handed if you had to, if you immersed yourself long enough in a condition or environment to do so. But the thing is like, it's nature versus nurture, and nurture is always downstream from nature. So biology is what is going to be the operative state. Whether or not that natural proclivity gets expressed because you like, maybe you're naturally a proficient artist or a musician, but you live in a society that like crushes and represses music and art or something like that, then you're probably never going to be as good as you would be if you lived with your parents were musicians themselves and they really encouraged it and stuff like that. So yes, there is that.
I have a little nerdy anecdote about genetics of handedness. If you want to give me a minute,
I want to hear it because I might need it.
So this is great. For the longest time, we thought there was a 3-to-1 split for right-handed, left-handed, right? So you have 3/4 of people will be right-handed, 1/4 of people will be left-handed. That is a perfect Mendelian split for genetics. It's like, right-handed is dominant, left-handed is recessive. The genetic breakdown does not fall that way. The genetic breakdown has nothing to do with right or left, even though there is a 3/4 split for right-handed. The genetic breakdown is for ambidextrous or handed. And and so some people are more likely to be handed and some people are more likely to be able to be ambidextrous, and you lose that ability as you grow. But because there's the cultural influence to prefer right-handed, the handed, so all the ambidextrous people will lean right, and then half the people, dude,
I was ambidextrous. And I used to be able to write with my left hand, and I can't anymore.
Yeah,
but it's just one of those fascinating things.
My brother is ambidextrous, and like he signs his name with his left hand. But man, it just aggravated. When we used to play Little League, he was a switch hitter, so he could like go either side, and he used to like terrify like the pitchers back then. But I don't know if he could still do it now. But like I remember him signing with his left hand, and then he could bat right or he could bat left.
Yeah, well, this was always really why I was bad at sports, because I could never figure out what the fuck hand to use, and it was like, it stressed me out as a child. But I wanted to go back to so one thing in regards to the nature versus nurture. So I do believe like nurture's downstream from nature. I do think nature has a big like component here, but like I also think like rational mind, reason, we're supposed to override our instincts, you know? And then there's this other aspect. I mean, I managed a strip club for like over 6 years. And I would say that one thing I can tell you is that almost all of them had daddy issues. No, like, or didn't have a father in the house. Almost all of them. Like, it was like, I don't know. Is that just anecdotal? I'm pretty sure you could probably go to most strip clubs in the country and be like, how many of you guys have a good relationship with your father or daddy issues? You'll get some that had great relationships with your father, but you'll get a large percentage that do not.
So
I'm
I'd
sure,
be
I'm
very
sure
curious.
that draws in women with daddy issues. Absolutely. I mean, there are professions that are going to. Sorry, go ahead, Kyle. You were going to say.
Well, I was going to say that I'd be really interested to see the data now with OnlyFans, right? Because the strip club has a whole bunch of like things that need to come together for somebody to step into a place like that. That's a physical commitment. Whereas OnlyFans, now I bet you're having a lot less people with daddy issues still stepping in because you've removed all of the
Well, there's an economic incentive for those people to do that because you could do it from the comfort of your home.
Well, yeah. Well, here's my issue with OnlyFans because from the strip club, the one good thing that the strip club gave strippers was one, anonymity. They could go be a stripper from 18 to 25, leave. Nobody will ever fucking know. You know, they had an alias and they're fine. But the OnlyFans is forever. What?
But OnlyFans provides an alias too, because
it's your face, it's your body.
Yeah, but I mean, your body and face are at the strip club too.
No, but the difference is that there's no cameras allowed at strip clubs, and that's the reason. At least at the strip club I worked at, like, it was there was a reason why there are no cameras or anything allowed, and it's because it gives you that aspect of anonymity, and I think that my main issue with OnlyFans is that it does attract girls that aren't prepared for that kind of lifestyle, girls that don't fully understand what the repercussions of them are, of what that lifestyle is and what they're going to have to deal with long term. I would honestly be like, if you're even thinking about do that, go work at a strip club. Yeah, you're gonna have to like be in the presence of men and like do that first, then like see if you can handle that. At least then you're not like destroying your entire future immediately.
I think so. If you're hot enough to go work at a strip club, then you're probably hot enough to do OnlyFans as well.
Of course, most of them went to do OnlyFans.
You're looking at sex appeal. I mean, that's really what most women today. Now, this is me speaking as a guy who's been doing Access Vegas for over a year now. But I know porn stars like who are legitimately in the business, right? And they can't survive unless they also have OnlyFans because all the other girls are doing it. And if you're a stripper and you're in porn and you're on OnlyFans, that's that's the trifecta. That's what you have to, if you are going to be, if your brand is, I don't know, pieceofass.com and I am, I'm going to be a stripper, I'm going to be a porn star, and I'm going to OnlyFans, you have to do that if you want to compete against any woman who would be of the same caliber that you would be. And so it's almost like this escalation thing. And by the way, that's not just in like OnlyFans or pornography or anything like that. It's also in like things like churches and stuff. So like, it's not enough to just be a pastor of a church right now. You have to have your YouTube, your worship team has to be streamed. You have to have a blog. You have to have social media. You have to be on all the time. Did you say something in the sermon the other night? Well, Joe over here has a million different questions to tell you why you're a son of a bitch. And now you have to like actually have that interaction with them. Whereas like prior to social media, you didn't have that. You could just go to church on Sunday, do a sermon and be done with it and go have dinner at Denny's and go back home. Right. And so now everybody's their own brand of me. Like myself included, probably everybody here in this as well. And if you are online, if you have a media presence, if you have an Instagram, I don't care if you're 12 years old, if you have an Instagram account, you're your own brand. And so if your business or your brand is based on stripping, well, guess what? It's not enough to be a stripper. You also have to be a stripper with an OnlyFans. And it's not enough to be OnlyFans now, because now those bitches who are in porn, they're going to outclass you too, and they're going to lap you. So now you got to do porn or something close to it, OnlyFans, and be a stripper as well if you want to stay competitive. And the problem with that is first of all, what you said before, Brandy, which was there's a digital footprint that's going to be there forever. So you think you got them, all taken off of browsers or whatever the fuck you were on.
Yeah.
It's still there. Somebody has a copy of whatever it is that you're doing. And so not only that, but you're also going to be dealing, especially if you have OnlyFans, you're also going to be dealing with the real world as well. So if you happen to be, like I said, a surgery nurse with an OnlyFans, you're probably going to lose that job because now the people say, oh, I saw you banging your husband. It was great, great material. Love the content, Or if you're a school teacher at a high school or something like that, and you have an OnlyFans, well, guess what? You're not going to be a school teacher for very much longer because that's just simply that's something that's distracting for the kids and everything else that's in there. So there's going to be, or like a police officer or whatever else, right? Especially if you're like a top creator. So Now how do you get away from that? It becomes what I said was lifestyle creep. Is it's what I call too much, too young, too fast, right? It's like you get so much money for doing next to nothing, even if you didn't train for it at all. And you don't necessarily have to be young, but it's like new to you, and you don't know what to do with this, instant overnight success, because now you're on OnlyFans and you're like in the top 0.001% creators, and you didn't go through the process of like maturing into being an OnlyFans stripper or an OnlyFans porn star, or whatever else it is. So getting out of it, it'd be nice to say, oh, I'm just going to be a stripper, do it for 3 years, and then I'm done.
Well,
college, so I can go to be an emergency room nurse, and then just say, fuck it, I'm going to go be an OnlyFans star.
Well, no, I would say this is what been my because when I first started working in the strip club, I was a door girl. Then I became a manager. And during that time, there was no OnlyFans. There were a few girls that did porn, but they got shunned. Everyone talks shit about the porn girls at the strip club. But I was at like a very high end strip club. The girls that what's hilarious is the girls that made the most money were the girls that were weirdly going to school for nursing. And they always use that as part of their pitch. And they were really good at playing up the girl next door, like almost slightly like very hot, but not like super porn star hot, just girl like hot. And like and a lot of them are not strippers now. They're almost all married. And nobody I highly doubt anyone knows about their past lives, and that is the difference, which is why my big issue is that when like young girls that are like 18 or 19 or 20 that are going into this industry, they don't fucking know you don't know what you're getting into. I would even say like them going into a strip club, I'm like, you don't understand the repercussions of what you're doing. Like, and there's no transparency. Like, people are just like, it's okay, you can do it. And it's like, no, you need to at least have some transparency of like, these are the consequences. Are you willing to live with them? If you're willing to live with the consequences, do it. But if you're not, don't.
Having somebody like, the problem is like, you can't tell them what those consequences are without seeming like you're being judgmental. God forbid.
I feel like I can.
Maybe
you're
you
a woman.
I can do that.
But for a time anyways. But I was just talking about this on my show the other day. It's what Robert Greene called grand strategy, right? You can fight little battles, but you have to like win the war, right? You have to have a God's eye view of the battlefield and see what you're doing. Well, the thing is like most women who get to be like strippers at like say 21, 22, 23, they don't think what are they going to be doing in the next 10 years. It's what's happening now. It's like, it's just watching what's unfolding. What's the next thing I'm doing now? And so what is, again, going back to like Myron and Fresh, this is something that they talk about all the time, is like, you got to realize that if you are going to be on OnlyFans, or if you're going to be in any way online showing your ass, I don't care if it's on Instagram, you're still going to have a digital footprint. And that's going to, I'm not saying like, oh, well, guys aren't going to want, no, guys are going to want to bang you no matter what. But like 10 years, 20 years from now, maybe you've got kids and mommy, hey, what's this picture I see on Instagram from you like way back in 20 years ago before I was born? Those are some weird conversations that are probably going to have to take place. That, by the way, this is like something that we have never done before, sort of in Western society, is having the ability to go back 20, 30. I mean, hell, I'm 55, man. I'm a Gen X. I can go back on Facebook and see people like from high school right now, from like 1986, and go, I don't need to go to a class reunion. I could just go see what the hell they're doing on Facebook anytime I want to. This is the only time in history we've really been able to sort of keep track with that level of accuracy, because people want to show pictures, they want to relate, they want to be about it and say, here's where I'm at and this is what I'm doing. But the problem is that also has the downs. In some ways it's good, in some ways it's bad, because you have a digital footprint that's going to stick with you for the rest of your life. And if we were able to sort of like inform women and say, look, here's what, if you want to be an OnlyFans, you want to be a stripper, whatever, fine. But look in the terms of grand strategy.
Yes.
You're going to be a stripper now at 21. What are you going to do when you're 31? Are you going to still be a stripper? Maybe you will,
or save your money. So this is what I've told.
Man.
Yeah. This is what I'd have this conversation with girls when they first started. I said, okay, you're 18. You have an option. You can retire by 30. If you save your money now, you can retire by 30, but you have to start saving and caring about this now. 90% of them didn't listen, but some of them would, and some of them would actually like do the thing and like save money. But I would say most, you know, would buy their fancy handbags and the designer clothes and blow all their money because they wanted to, you know, like you're young and retarded.
This gets to a big meta of like, you're gonna have retards that fuck everything up no matter what, and you're gonna have people who excel no matter what. And those girls who, you know, who excelled and chose to save, those girls would have been fine no matter what they did. And the people who are taking the red pill to hate absolutely everybody on the face of the planet and say, here's your White Claw, get the fuck off my podcast every single time, those people would have fucked everything up and burned the whole neighborhood down to the ground no matter what.
We have like Mike and I know several like women who are in the business that are like, you know, are still doing pornography right now. And I know probably like 2 girls right now who are set. Like they got their money, they got their bag, they're single mothers, but they're still doing it. They're still stripping, they're still OnlyFans, and like all 3, like I said, the full trifecta, right? But they have their money down and they aren't, you know, they're not all hooked on drugs or anything like that. In fact, they're very like business savvy and they know what they're doing, but they are the rare exceptions.
Yeah.
So
for sure. And I agree with that. I think that it has to be like being honest with the consequences. So I would love to get your idea on the sexual revolution, right? So I see obviously trads think net negative. A lot of people think the sexual revolution was a negative. I don't, because I think that freedom is never a negative. So in my opinion, it's not that the sexual revolution is a problem and freedom isn't the problem. It's that people don't have responsibility and are able to deal with the consequences of what happens when you use that freedom. You know, like men have had to deal with the consequences of their actions. Women were under the responsibility of men for a very long time. Now they have to be responsible for their actions. And they're having a hard time dealing with the fact that it's time to be responsible for themselves and that they can't go to someone to take care of them. Like, you know, you make mistakes, you fuck up, you have to live with the consequences.
The problem is they're not living with those consequences right now. And
right,
if we want to talk about like
digital footprint, they're gonna.
Oh yeah, well, they are, but like not sort of in the most immediate sense, right? So it goes back to so when I talk about the sexual revolution, I usually pinpoint it right around 1965 because that's when hormonal birth control really took off. Okay, hormonal birth, like the pill had been out, like I realize it's been out since the 1960s, but it wasn't really heavily marketed until about 1965. After that, you see a huge spike in divorce that tracks almost identically to the divorce rate to the usage of hormonal birth control during the mid 60s. Then you have the sexual revolution that comes in the wake of an invention that for the first time in human history prevents pregnancy. So you can fuck and not have to worry about getting pregnant. And we put effectively what we did was we put human reproduction unilaterally in the hands of one sex, which was women at that time. So and then also what happened after that, I'm actually working on I think it's going to be a smallish book, but it's going to be based on like that decade between 1965 and 1975. All of the things that we deal with right now in the 2020s, right, in the 21st century, if you look at the decline in divorce, or the decline in marriage, the rise of like SSRIs, the autism and all this other stuff, if you look at all of these things that we talk about sort of like one data point, like individually, like isolated data points, and we say, oh, isn't it terrible that like the marriage rates at like six per 1,000? It started right in 1965 with the advent of hormonal birth control. And then in the wake of that, that's when you got the sexual revolution. So now women can say, you know what? I don't need a man, but I want a man. You got Gloria Steinem and Betty Friedan in the militant feminist era saying like, you know, women are becoming the men that they wanted to marry, which now here we are. That's basically all I deal with when I'm dealing with women on, red pill terms right now. But if you go back to like 1968, no-fault divorce gets initiated to deal with the rise in the divorce spike that happened right around 1965. 1971, economists, what happened? We go off the gold standard. Then more women come into the workplace because they're getting divorced and they don't want to have sex with anybody that they don't want to have sex with, and they're strong, independent women, independent of men. So they can get into the workforce. And if you look at right around 1971, you will see the productivity skyrockets from there, but mean wages stay the same because we put more women into the workplace. And so like when I love pointing that out when people ask me like, well, Rolo, if women were getting paid less or whatever, wouldn't that be the only thing that employers would do? Like, yeah, go look at productivity versus mean wages since 1971. And when was Roe v. Wade? What, 1974, 72, somewhere around there. So you've got like on-demand abortion as a fail-safe for what? For hormonal birth control. And then you've got Title IX, and then you've got more.
1973.
73. And then 1974. You know what happened in 1974? And feminists think this was a great big victory for them. Was the credit card companies finally let them have credit cards, irrespective of whether they had a man or they could have a savings account now. It's like, yeah, because you're getting divorced at higher rates right now. You're entering into the workforce. And we also went off the gold standard. So now the US dollar is basically a fiat currency. So why not let the little ladies have a
basically
Visa card now? It's not feminism. It's because the insurance companies wanted to make a shit ton of money off of you. So now they can do that. They can have their own, bank accounts, and they're independent of men. Well, yay, feminism. Well, that sounds good for like Visa and MasterCard. But then you've got, Title IX, then you got Duluth model of feminism, and you just keep going on from there. It all tracks back to one era, and it's right around 1965 and the sexual revolution. So was the sexual revolution a net negative or a net positive? It all depends on what your perspective is. So when I talk about the sexual revolution, I think people presume I'm talking about it in terms of it was a bad thing and we ought to go back in time and take our DeLorean back to 1964 and steer a course correct or something like that. The fact of the matter is like I always say that conservatives don't want the red pill. They want a time machine. They want to go back and to a romanticized era that really they probably wouldn't be able to exist in the first place. Right. But I think that whether it's a positive or a negative all depends on what your perspective happens to be. So if you look at the decline of fertility rates, by the way, we've been below replacement level in the United States since 1975. So the time to bang a gong about fertility rates was back then, not 2023. So I think I think a lot of the rhetoric that you hear from traditional conservatives talking about how bad hormonal birth control is, it makes women crazy. Like, okay, which one? Because since then there are 27 different forms of birth control for women, and for men there's still only 2. Wrap the rascal and keep your pecker in your pants. That's basically it. Don't have sex or put on a condom. And I think it's interesting that we have developed 27 different forms of birth control for women since 1965, but yet we only have a condom for guys thus far. And I think
there are some interesting male birth control in the clinic. They're not. Mm-hmm. There was one in India that didn't pass the FDA standards. I have kept an eye on some of those. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting thing, but I've talked to a lot of guys, and there's a lot of guys who are less inclined to take, male birth control, like an injection. So let's say
Vasogel or something like that.
Yeah, exactly that one.
Yeah. After the last couple of years, I can't really blame people for looking at shit like that and saying dude, I don't know.
Yeah.
So one thing that I liked about your perspective, I'm sorry to cut you off, Ryan, but is that people want to look at birth control and say this is some big conspiracy, and okay, granted there may be some truth in that, but one thing that I've definitely picked up off of you being in the libertarian world and where a lot of people kind of thrive in conspiracy is that you don't get conspiracy without human nature, and that's what I think a lot of people want to obfuscate. So whenever you say demons or the elves or whatever, you obfuscate human nature and accountability for those exact players. Well, I know the lingo.
Yeah, well, it's like I always whenever people start talking about who is they, Rolo? I'm like, can we skip to the part where you tell us it's all the Jews? Because we just there first and we just have this, skip all the rest of that crap.
Wait, okay, I'm sad because I got muted in the middle of your birth control conversation. What? Fuck.
Rewind. That's fine. We'll rewind for you.
No. For the sexual revolution aspect, because I was actually very interested in that. And what I miss?
Consensus.
Consen-
There's basically what I did was I just broke down like all of the things and the issues that we talk about today in 2023.
And you think the sexual revolution is the cause?
I think the sexual revolution is just the natural outcome. It's the most logical, outcome of hormonal birth control. So what's going to happen to humans? Yeah, well, certainly in Western cultures, right? What's going to happen when you say, here, ladies, here's a pill that will prevent, you can basically have sex with whoever you want and not worry about pregnancy. You get to decide when you're going to have a baby, when you're not going to have a baby, who you're going to have it with and who you're not going to have it with. And essentially what hormonal birth control does is it gives women ultimate unilateral control over, well, first of all, human reproduction.
Well, didn't women always have control over the at least sex in general? So it gives them more.
The thing is the risk of pregnancy was always there. So you had sort of this implicit contract between guys who are saying, well, if you get me knocked up, then you got to stick around. You got to help me raise a kid, right? It's like that shotgun wedding kind of thing. And that prior to say I would say certainly during the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, right? Up to that point, it was, that was pretty much the life course of guys. If you want to get laid, you got to marry her. You got to find a woman who you're going to settle down with and have kids with and everything else. It's not that there weren't players back then. It just certainly wasn't what we have today. But if you look at the impact that hormonal birth control has had on humanity in general, I would say the effects are more significant than the atom bomb. We have
interesting.
We have a unilateral. It's basically eugenics. Like human females get to decide who gets born and who does not.
Are you saying that it's you think it's negative? That the birth control was a negative thing?
Well, I will say that I've done. So let me see if I can put this in like libertarian terms for you. I did a show with George Gammon. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him, but he's a rebel capitalist guy. We did a show on Malthusian economics, which is basically population control. And the theory goes something like this is, well, we have nuclear weapons and we have mutually assured destruction. And so we can't really other than small scale wars and engagements, we really can't have major world wars anymore without the risk of actually, nuclear annihilation. But we have so much excess population. How are we going to back off of that? Well, the idea, the conspiracy theory is that it's like the Rockefellers or the elves or whoever invented birth control. And as a result of that, we see a decline in fertility rates. And now it's under, replacement level, but only in certain select countries and not, these other countries over here. And so that it's some sort of like I said, Malthusian, political, social agenda, meaning basically that this is how we're going to control population through social means and through chemical castration, essentially, women get to be in control of the human reproductive process. Comes down to really women of Western cultures are basically eugenicists. They could decide who's fit and who's not. So is it a net negative or is it a net positive? I think it all depends on whose perspective you're looking at it from. So when people ask me, is the sexual revolution a net negative? I'm inclined, for me personally, if you're going to ask my opinion, I will say, yes, I think it's a net negative. But I also understand, if it weren't for these certain things, I've never lived in a world that didn't have hormonal birth control. I was born in 1968. So I've never known a society that didn't have casual sex, didn't have on-demand pornography, didn't have on-demand abortion. So for me, my frame of reference is the last 55 years. So, but if I ask my mother-in-law, who's 76 years old, and she can tell, she's told me this before. She says when they first came out with fertility clinics and sperm banks and things like that, the people, the women of that time, that era, the mid 50s or, right around then into the 60s, they were appalled. Mm-hmm. And they said, they'll just use this so women can just have babies without men. And they couldn't fathom that because there was a stigma about being a single mother prior to the sexual revolution. If you were a single mother and you had no father there, the child was a bastard child. That's where we get the word bastard from. And you used to have to they would do that, what was called send the girl away. And the girl would go and have the child and either they would give it up for adoption or they give it to the grandparents to raise as their kid. Right. Mm-hmm. And then, because it brought such shame and such stigma for that, But in a post-sexual revolution world, women are proud single mothers, and it's almost like superhero status to be a single mom right now because she can do it all. And so that stigma is that I use this as sort of the example for like sexual revolution versus post-sexual revolution. So there's all these things, checks and balances that we used to have with intersexual dynamics prior to the sexual revolution that we have no concept of right now because we've lived the last 60 years in and by the way, the experiment that is the sexual revolution is still going on right now.
Well, I think that with every technology, with any technology, things shift, and it's like it's imbalanced, and then we have to figure the balance out, which is what I think we're in right now. I actually think that it was very imbalanced. It's like a very unbalanced scale, but it's figuring out how to get it back to in equilibrium with every technology. I think it's like a huge culture shock. I actually want to, Rin, what do you think about this? Because
this has been fascinating to me, and I've had a lot.
What's your perspective?
I mean, so on one hand, I agree completely with that, Brandy, where it's like, if you talk about the introduction of hormonal birth control as a new tech and how that has an impact, and then you think about every major technological shift, like all the way up to social media and OnlyFans, we have never had a balancing period after that. There's not really been a full generation with one single change happening. It's been one change, then 3 changes, then 8 changes.
And we're overwhelmed.
I mean, it's just the reaction
happening over
is
time.
Fucking, I'm curious, Rollo, if you would say that, like, I love the idea, the concept of the eugenics, like, being held in one thing, but do you think that it was an egalitarian choice before hormonal birth control? Were men and women equally choosing who was getting to reproduce beforehand?
So I'll give you my patriarchy speech. How's that?
Sure.
Because prior to the sexual revolution, look, you got to remember that when hormonal birth control became popularized, divorce skyrocketed to the point where we needed no-fault divorce, at least in the state of California. Thank you, Ronald Reagan. You're conservative messiah, right? He's the one that initiated it. And then state by state, no fault became, and by the way, that was to facilitate so many divorces coming into the legal system at the time that they're like, fucking no harm, no foul. You guys go get divorced. But I think that as far as the what you call the hormonal birth control and what's known as genetic gap, right? It's like the technological advances happen so rapidly that we don't know how to deal with them as they come along. And by that, so you look at hormonal birth control as a like I said, it's more significant than the atom bomb, but it's an invention in a sense that like it gives women the power of eugenics. Was that something that they had prior to that? Yes and no, but getting back to the patriarchy thing, prior to the sexual revolution, patriarchy has always been sort of the default. It's in a sexually dimorphous species such as men and women, right? Men had we lived under patriarchy. We had a guy who was the man who was the head of the household. He was a father, and he was responsible for his wife and for his kids. And he also had the authority to affect that responsibility at that time. So when a woman needed a man to sort of have kids and to form a family and everything, there was an understanding of gender roles, like the division of labor, whatever else you want to call it. So was it egalitarian then? I don't think so, but it was certainly more balanced than what we have now, because in an idealized state, if you have a man who is, say, the head of the household, who is he is the authority in the house, he's also responsible. So I think when we look back at authority, like if you look at the writings of, like, say, Gloria Steinem or Betty Friedan, and they turn patriarchy into this horrible, tyrannical, controlling dynamic that's been happening since, like, the Hebrews left freaking Egypt, right? I mean, it's like, let my people go kind of thing. And it's really what they're describing is what I call androcentrism. It's all authority and no responsibility. So men.
Well, this is why I'm a Pagula feminist. And
they have no responsibility. Whereas in what we have now, gynocentrism, which is women have 100% authority and 0% responsibility or accountability or whatever. That's why all of these shows that hold women accountable, you want to know why they're popular? Because it's a reversal of that. Finally, it's like, oh, we're going to hold them responsible or accountable And that's it's a breath of fresh air. It's something that seems like it's something very novel. So if you look at tyranny is described by having 100% authority and 0% responsibility. Whereas if you have the opposite, where you have 100% responsibility and 0% authority, that's slavery. So when you have a guy who is still responsible for all of these masculine duties, he's got to be the head of the household. He's got to be responsible for the kids. He's got to be responsible for provisioning, protection, and parental investment. But he has no authority over his family. That is the definition of slavery right now. So we live in a condition of gynocentrism, whereas prior to the sexual revolution, we were living sort of in a patriarchal way, where in an idealized state, I'm not saying it was perfect, okay, but in an idealized state, that man still had masculine responsibilities, but he had a commensurate amount of authority so that he could actually affect those responsibilities. So what happens when a single mother's child
Can I pause you for a second? Because some of this is new to me. I might need you to. So
Okay.
give me the breakdown on the gynecological focus with because I'm struggling to wrap my head around women having 100% of the authority and none of the responsibility.
Yeah.
And this, so this might be just kind of standard talking issue here, but can you give me a quick, bring me home on that?
I it would probably be easier for me to just link you to the Substack that I just wrote about this.
Sure.
So there's so if you look at there's two different concepts. One is gynocentrism and the other is androcentrism. Okay, so androcentrism, when feminists, like militant feminists, so like the Glorious Dynams of the world, when they describe quote unquote patriarchy, what they're really describing is a tyrannical form of androcentrism, meaning that men, it's a society by men for men with 0% responsibility and 100%. It's like the Handmaid's Tale. If you watch the Handmaid's Tale, that is a androcentric fantasy. And women love this shit, because they think that wouldn't be horrifying if we were forced into having, babies that we didn't want to have. That is that state that I don't know what the fantasy world of the Handmaid's Tale. That is an androcentric world that's been created. Gynocentrism is just the flip of that, which is it's by women for women, 0% responsibility or accountability in that term, in those terms, and 100% authority. So when by authority, what I mean is you've got more women in positions of law, psychology, politics. You've got I've talked about this with was it James Sexton, the divorce attorney guy.
I love him.
Yeah,
it's funny. We were just talking about him on my channel. Yeah, he was on my show a couple weeks ago.
But when we talk about divorce and we look at the amount of responsibility that man is presumed to assume in marriage, whereas a woman has the full power of the state behind her. That's what I'm sort of getting at, is a man has these masculine responsibilities of the 20th century of an old school patriarchy, but yet he has no real authority to be responsible for those responsibilities, to affect those responsibilities. So if you got, I'll give you an example. When we see a single mother whose child becomes a criminal or a drug addict or tries to commit suicide or any of these really negative social factors, the first thing we say is, where's the dad? Where's the father? How come there's no present father in the house? That could be any number of reasons, but what I'm getting at is the fact that we default to that instead of saying, well, the mom fucked up. We don't say that. We go, where's the dad? And that's because that's our natural, we presume that a father is going to be responsible for his wife and for his kids and, to provisioning, protection, and parental investment. And so we wouldn't have this conversation if there was still, say, a stigma against single mothers like there was prior to the sexual revolution. So when we look at gynocentrism and we look at androcentrism, those are both forms of tyranny. When we look at matriarchy and we look at patriarchy, those are forms where it's a responsibility, but there's a commensurate amount of authority so that you can affect the responsibility that is implied to the father in that case.
Is there a bit of selection bias in some of these instances where almost the where's the father is a holdover from that lingering previous generations kind of thought, and we're not hearing about all the single mothers, single fathers who are raising children fine and successfully with no kind of issue?
That goes back to my my understanding. I've been talking about how we sort of default to marriage or long-term relationships as a operative goal state. So one of the things that when we talk about, especially now with uninvolved fathers, especially in the Black community right now, I think there's this stereotype that Black fathers don't want to have anything to, they just want to fuck the women and leave and move on to the next, hit it and quit it kind of thing. When in fact, statistically speaking, Black men in the Black communities, men are more involved with their kids than at any other time in history right now. The reason why we still cling to that old stereotype is because they're not married. If they were married, then we would say, oh, well, they're married, so there's a father in the house and it's not a single parent household anymore. You could have the most involved, like divorced father or like not non-married father that still takes his kid and does all kinds of stuff and is very, very involved. But statistically speaking, he will still be part of that group who fatherless children.
Single mother, right? Yeah. And I deal with that a lot in the non-traditional communities and things like that. This is a whole thing where
that's only one way we express that. So when we look at I was just talking about this the other day. When we look at what are women attracted to? What are men attracted to? The incels aren't making an effort or whatever else. Women really want to get with these guys, or what makes a man attractive. But we're always talking about what makes them attractive in the sense that they're going to get married and live happily ever after. It's always within the framework of a monogamous marriage as being the operative goal state. And we really need to stop, get out of that framework.
I agree
Full
with that.
For me. Yeah.
But
marriage is a bad thing. I'm just saying that it has to be, if we're going to understand the data sets, we have to say, okay, here's what women want to get with, and here's what women would like to get within, the long term. You have to have there has to be, it's like I was talking about how hypergamy is in alpha fucks and beta bucks. We only focus on the long-term security, provisioning, protection, parental investment side of things because that fits in with the marriage operative state, right? It's not like, well, women want to fuck the hot guy in the foam cannon party too. They might not necessarily want to marry him, but that's not going to make it in the stats. So.
Well, and back to what you were talking about with the sexual revolution and everything. And so, like I said before, I'm a Paglia feminist, which is all about accountability and responsibility for the individual, which I think is the problem. And if you blame everything on the patriarchy, and a huge issue of this is the state, I'm actually someone that is I'm against state marriage and the state being involved in your love life. I think we should abolish alimony. I think that this is a huge issue that is involved with all of what you're talking about with women having having kind of an upper hand here would be due to the state giving it to them. So obviously get rid of all of that. And but I would say that women don't have a negative repercussions for the sexual revolution. They do 100%. There's plenty. I think it's Louise Perry. She talks about it all the time. She's very anti the sexual revolution. There's a lot of these ex-hoes, now reformed trads. They're all very anti-sexual revolution. And in my opinion, but
it's very convenient.
Yeah, no, but so for me, I'm
going to church now.
I don't fully feel, I don't feel this way, but not just on a feeling level, but just on an intellectual level, because it's the freedom itself is not the problem. The fact that women got birth control and don't have to basically become breeders, I don't think that's the issue. I still think the issue comes down to, one aspect is the state, and another aspect comes down to personal responsibility. I don't think that the birth control made it so that women aren't having to have any repercussions, because I'm sorry, if you are for most women, not all women, but for a lot of women are not going to enjoy sleeping with 100 dudes or whatever, and getting ran through. There are women that do. I just don't think that it's that. I just don't think it's everyone. And the problem is there is that negative repercussion of them thinking oh, I'm free, it's great, but that is due to them not understanding the consequences of their actions. Do you know what I mean? I still think it comes down to them just not being responsible for themselves, and that women just need to actually be individuals. It's men and women both need to come back to on an individual level, less, oh, it's men, oh, it's women. We're all individuals. We all need to be responsible for ourselves, and we all need to deal with the tech that is evolving around us. And equilibrium, like, I don't even know what the word is, but like, deal with it. Just fucking deal with it.
Well, the problem you're running into is really, I mean, first of all, you're putting a lot of hope and effort into like personal responsibility. Like people are going to actually take that advantage of that.
Well, I mean, but it's just like it is the fucking answer though. Like, I mean, we can, in my opinion, I think that is the answer for every woman that is having problems.
If every woman had had the same like level of sort of like insight that you do, then I would agree.
But most women don't want to be accountable. I mean, let's be honest, and it is part of human nature at this point. I mean, you have to ask what the human nature is behind a lot of the goals of the state as it is today.
Well, really what it comes, here's what I think is happening. And I meant to get back to this is that what we're looking at is a feature of what's called genetic gap. Okay. Genetic gap is like human advancements in technology advance so fast that human beings and human culture and our ability to process or digest, interpret, and process it. And what are the best practices now that we have this? Those technology jumps happen so fast that we don't have the time to generationally speaking, we don't have the time to sort of catch up and say, oh, we should have done this. Right now we're seeing this happen live in real time. Well, really right now, but with social media and having this ability to have mass media. I don't know where you guys are at. I'm in Reno, Nevada. You guys are probably across the globe somewhere else. Only in this era have we been able to do something like this. That's what I'm saying is like, I don't think twice about like jumping on. I've got my own studio here and I can go do this. Or if I have to be at a hotel, I can use my laptop or something like that. But I'm Gen X, right? You guys might be millennials or Gen Z or whatever else. And you don't take it for, simply just take it for granted. But the thing is like we have technologies that happen so quickly that we just by the time we figured out what's the best way to do this, that technology is obsolete, and now we've already moved on to something else. And like if we look at like say when did the Wright brothers 1906 is when they developed man flight, right? By the 60s we put a man on the moon. Yes, we put a man on the fucking moon. But we had jet
allegedly.
We had
fucking kill me now.
Engines and here's a better. We had jet planes by the 60s. Okay. So we're talking about a jump of like maybe 60 years. We go from the Wright brothers to, SR-71s, right? we make those kinds of jumps, the atomic weapons, of course, harnessing the atom, hormonal birth control, I would definitely put into that category. The internet also, in the introduction to my book on religion, I made the comparison of the internet being like the Gutenberg press, movable type press. If you look at what happened in the wake of that one invention of the movable type, what was the first thing they printed? The Bible. So the literacy rates skyrocketed through Europe right after that. And then of course
Martin Luther,
the Protestant Reformation, and then that causes wars and everything else that's happened as a result of that. But that one invention advanced human technology in Western Europe and other places too, across the globe, to the point where now we have universities, we're reading more, we're writing more, we're doing these things, the literacy goes up. And that, because it's a dissemination of information. The same thing happened right around the late 90s, maybe 2000, let's just say, right at the millennium. And now we have social media. Human beings were never intended to be able to talk to I don't know how many people you got in the chat right now, but I regularly talk to probably like 2,000 people every time I do a live stream. And then maybe, if I'm lucky, 100,000 people watch the show. Never in human history have we had a platform where you can just blather on about the most inane shit and people will watch it, right? And so when you look at those things, and you look at that advancement, we always, I'm going to quote like what Jurassic Park here. It's like we're so busy figuring out, can we do it rather than should we do it?
But you talk about genetic gap. I mean, you could make an argument that the agricultural revolution we still haven't caught up to, right? Like, and I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I think I'm having a harder time with you could make an argument that like things were better previous to, hormonal birth control. But if there isn't enough, like I would want to see like in a perfect utopian world, we do 50 more years of this nonsense where no more technology gets introduced. We just level out, plateau, go another two kinds of generations,
and go live on like communes or something.
well, and then we ask, and it's like, who wants to go back to this way? Who wants to go back this way? And most likely, you'd have a split. You'd have some people who are like, I want to go back to patriarchy. Some people will be like, I want to go to matriarchy. And you have a bunch of people in the middle who are like, this kind of chaos may not be optimal, but I want it. And like, how do we, like, the problem is, you like, society thinks that like, society wants to have one, right? There wants to be this, like, this is how humans are, right? And there's a bunch of different humans who are like, nah, I don't like that way, and other people who are like, I like that way. And this is where,
again, we're talking about best practices. So the technology is what it is. That's the praxeology, right? That's it is what it is, right? What do you do with it is what it is? Have you seen these memes where like they'll show you like this like idyllic little cabin and it's like by some stream something, and it says, would you stay here with no cell phone and no internet for 3 months for $100,000? I'm like, fuck, I'd go there for free. Are you kidding? Happy to be able and be able to come back and like not have anything go to hell in my absence. Sure, fuck yeah, I'd do that. I love that because it's like that like perfectly describes like this desire to sort of like go back to this rustic rural way of life and everything like that. And it's like the fact of the matter that it would even be appealing in the first place is like just proof positive that we're at a stage right now where we don't even know what the hell to do with just the cell phone in our pockets right now. So like when it comes to like say pornography, like I've said this before, is like, you know, a 10-year-old kid with a cell phone has access to a degree of virtual degree of sexuality that like Caligula didn't have, or like, you know, the emperors in the Forbidden City didn't have. And so now what are you going to do about that? What's the best practices? Are you going to say, well, you know, Johnny's got a porn addiction now and we don't know what to do with him and he just needs to stop touching himself and no fap November and all this? Like that doesn't do jack shit because the machine is still the machine. The human's machine still stays the same no matter what the technology is. So when people, and maybe this is more to your point, Ren, is when people ask me this, I get this constantly and they'll say, Rollo, when do you think the pendulum is going to swing back to like all this moral degeneracy and what is it? Strong men create good times and good times create weak men and weak men create bad times and bad times create strong men. And it goes into this cycle. And we really desperately want to believe that everything happens like in cycles. No, it fucking doesn't. There is no pendulum. You only get to go forward. So when people say, well, wouldn't it be great if we could live in a time before the sexual revolution? I go, yeah. Do you have where's your time machine? Show me where. How are we going to do that? Repeal the 19th. Fuck you, Pearl. The thing is that sounds great. Show me how you're going to do it. What are we doing? Guys, let's have a revolution. Great. How do we reorganize society after the revolution? I don't know. I just want to fuck things up. That's all it is. It's going forward. I'm not saying you shouldn't learn from the past and take the best of that and apply it to your best practices in the future. But stop looking at this freaking romanticized bullshit era of like father knows best and like, you know, this 50s, like, you know, nuclear family stuff. Cause that is gone. Just take the best of it and do the best you can going forward. You can't, I think this is a quote from like Dune. God damn, I love Frank Herbert. But it's like, you can't back yourself into the future. You know, you can't put the car in reverse and go into the future. And I thought that was it because you're always looking behind you and you want to go forward by looking behind you. It's like, no, there is no pendulum. You only go forward.
Yes. And that's the thing.
Oh, sorry. Kyle, go. Sorry.
I think that's the thing a lot of people kind of misunderstand. And like I was saying earlier, I talked to a lot of Orthodox Christian people, and they have this idealized version. And Rolla, I know you have a whole spiel on this, that, you know, if men would be better men, then women would be better women. But I mean, it's a silly idea because once again, times have completely changed. We don't know what things kind of look like from here on out. And like you said earlier as well, that we're still experimenting with this whole sexual revolution, how things play out. So like the idea that if men would just sack up and then be better men, I mean, women don't, the incentives and our culture and everything altogether today is completely different than 50 years ago. So we're not going to have the pendulum swing back and all the women are going to stay at home and be barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. We're going to move forward to something that looks completely different. And, you know, I don't know if we'll ever see a return to traditional families being the norm. Maybe we'd all like that, but
I don't think
it's going to be some different iteration.
Yeah. I think we need to embrace the change and figure out how to embrace the change. And I was going to say, Rin's one of my best friends. Rolo doesn't. I'm pretty sure I read your book, and one part says that men and women can't be friends. I don't know. I read something in there about that.
Awesome topic me and Mike have all the time because
So I was saying that's
Very
exactly what I said
friendly.
before the show.
Yeah,
with
but
your girlfriends if you're fucking them.
no. Well, one thing I really liked that Rin said once was that progressivism is the gas pedal and conservatism or traditionalism would be what I would say is the brakes, and like you kind of need both to steer the vehicle. You kind of need both to go to make it move. And I don't think that keep moving forward is the problem. You kind of need the traditional, or even like, I don't like to say conservative because I look at that in a different way, but I would say a traditional mindset to kind of keep things in check and be like, okay, are we going too fast? Is this okay? What are we doing here?
Was it conservative as progressivism driving the speed limit?
Yeah. But I don't think that there's any issue with that. Like I think that change is not the problem. Change is just something that we're always going to have to deal with, and we're going to have to learn how to deal with it, which is why I always bring it back to the individual and being like, okay, well, you need to get your shit together and you need to figure yourself out. I don't want to sound like Jordan Peterson. I feel like I do right now, but like, I genuinely feel like that's it, is like, it all comes back to you and how you relate to this world. If you keep blaming external factors for your fucking problems and you're like, oh, like it's the birth control, and oh God, it's because women vote, and oh God, it's all of these things, and that's why the world fucking sucks. It's like, fuck you, dude. Like, fucking figure your life out. Like, stop blaming all of the shit. It's going to continue to change, and all we can do is fucking work with it and try to at least make the state smaller so that it doesn't control our lives.
One of the things I get accused of, and this is like this gets lobbed at the red pill in general, is that it's long on like theory and short on like solutions. And like, that's not what the red pill is about. It's not about solutions. It's about describing it's about objective truth. It's about showing what's what. It's up to you as the individual to decide what is best practice. How are you going to use this information to better your lives? What are you going to do with these tools, and how are you going to better yourself? How are you going to change society? How are you going to change a law? How are you going to change the way you live? Maybe you're actually going to cancel your plans to kill yourself. Maybe perhaps that would be the best place to start.
Perhaps.
You can always kill yourself later.
But it's like best practices versus what, like when I talk about red pill, I talk about, there's a red pill is a theory, and like say game, for lack of a better term, is the practice, and one is incomplete without the other. So you need the theory so you can test it with game in the field, and then you go, okay, well, this worked and this didn't. We go back and we readjust. This is a scientific process. You go and readjust your hypothesis, and you go back and you test it again. And so we're getting the point right now, I think, where we have such a wealth, such a knowledge base of like, social dynamics, intersexual dynamics, and everything else, that we're still clinging to those old order ways of thinking about, like, we really want to have this nice, monogamous, leave it to Beaver, June Cleaver, father knows best, kind of like traditional monogamous nuclear family with, mom, dad, 2 kids, and a golden retriever in the front yard kind of thing. Problem is that's a 20th century ideal, and it's an old order way of thinking. We're in the 21st century dealing with all of the ability to understand, have all these data sets, and what we're going to use with, whether it's like your politics or it's your religion or it's intersexual dynamics or psychology, it doesn't matter what it is. We have more access to information at this day and age than we ever have in human history. And yet we still want things to be like it was in the 20th century. We still want this old order ideal, but we can't find a way to force fit it into this new 21st century set of data. And it's like, this contradicts all this other stuff. Like when I was talking about Carl Jung, for example, right? He had great things to say in the 40s, 50s, somewhere around there, right? Great, awesome, good. Problem is everything that he was saying was based on whatever the knowledge base and the database for humankind was at that time. So now here we are in the 21st century, and it's the same thing follows. It doesn't have to be psychology. It's this want to have this 20th century ideal, but we're trying to force fit it into the 21st century. So like when I look at Donald Trump, or I look at like Hillary Clinton, or I look at like, you know, all these people like Joe Biden, these are 20th century brands in the 21st century. Can we please have a 21st century fucking candidate? Can we please have a 21st?
I think that wasn't that kind of Obama, but
Yeah.
that didn't work out.
Yeah, but again, it's still based on 20th century ideals. You want to know what Trump and Hillary were? There was two 20th century brands fighting against each other in the 20th century, using 20th century ideals and thinking that was going to work in the 21st century, and it's not. We have to fucking catch ourselves. There's no fucking pendulum. We have to keep going forward, and once the first guy that figures that out and understands, like, he knows how to put off this emotionalism and stop using emotionalist language and start thinking empirically, that's the guy to worry about. That's the guy who's going to be the one who actually, like, you want to talk, he's either going to be the Antichrist or the world emperor or whatever. He's going to be a savior of the fucking universe, because he understands, it calculates in human nature into whatever it is he's doing, whether it's like politics or religion or whatever he's doing, understanding human nature in a 20th century empirical way, devoid of like worrying so much about emotionalism. That guy who unapologetically does that, that's going to be the guy to really watch out for, you know, going forward. But I think that the conflict that I always see between, like, say, conservatives or liberals or whatever the fuck it is, or men and women for that matter, is we're still trying to cling to these old order ideals that don't work in the 21st century with with social media, with understanding all this stuff. Case in point, I was just arguing the insignificance of assortative mating versus dual mating strategy, or hypergamy, right? Dual mating strategy probably worked very well in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and probably right up through the mid 80s. When you get into the social media age and women have had hormonal birth control as a norm for the last 40 or 50 years, now we see that it's really unburdened by buffers and anything else, any limitations. We divert more to hypergamy than we were for assortative mating. But if you were going to talk about, you want to compare those two, you're looking at an old order ideal versus a new order reality. It's the same thing with trans athletes, right? We want to pander to this biological man who is the number one female swimmer in the world, but put him in the men's division. He's the 436th place men's swimmer, right? That's the objective truth is he's a man.
Mm-hmm.
Going to win in that category. That's the reality of it. But the emotional side, the what we really hope and we really want, it's like the social conditioning and all this other crap. It's this emotional appeal. We want to believe that this guy can sort of gender identify as a female. And the fact of the matter is,
I can push back on that if you want. Like, if we want to have that dialogue.
Do it, Ren. Do it.
We're at the end of the thing. If we don't want to do the dialogue, we can do that. I'm curious as to, like, so we talk about like the athlete and division and things like that. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about Michael Phelps?
As a swimmer,
or just as a fair competitor?
Yeah. Well, I know what his record is, anyways.
So he has like a genetic condition where he basically doesn't produce lactic acid. So he has this whole kind of like, it's like one of those things where.
So it gives me an advantage. Yeah.
Well, it's really interesting, right? To think about this kind of thing where it's like, this is a guy who we celebrate because he won 20 fucking Olympic medals, but is literally a different genetic machine than everyone else who's doing this sort of thing.
Well, like Barry Bonds, doping.
Right. There's all kinds of different examples of this. And like most people get really hung up on like trans people showing up in these things in athletics because this is where we have a very segregated, like,
I think the thing is that the difference is so stark. Like, obviously the upper body strength between men and women is so completely different. I actually really like your argument though, because this kind of goes to genetics. So like the genetics of like Ronnie Coleman, that you what's the likelihood that you're going to see somebody that's 7 foot tall? Like my father-in-law is 6'7". How many people do you see walking around that are 6'7"? Not many. So like the genetics for that are so rare. And like Michael Phelps, I didn't even know that he had the inability to produce lactic acid. So I mean, I have to imagine that he's an incredible genetic anomaly, the same way Jay Cutler, Ronnie Coleman is. So like, but once again, the difference between men and women is so stark that like even if you put a woman on testosterone, the effects of testosterone even in the womb are so significant that it changes bone structure when the fetus is being developed. So I mean, that's how pronounced the differences in testosterone
I don't
are.
even I wouldn't even put it in those terms. So like Ren, this is like really what I'm talking about is the empirical reality is that a biological male is probably going to outperform a biological female in the challenges, the tests, the physical tests of swimming or whatever, whatever combat positions, where you being a firefighter, that kind of stuff, simply because they don't have the upper body strength that a man does. But if we want to live in a society that says women can do anything men can do, well, that's simply not true, because we can see on average that a woman is simply not going to be as effective a firefighter, for example, or effective as an NFL athlete or something like that as a male is going to be. But the problem with it is it's not doping. It's not like TRT. It's not anything like that. It's the idea that we have to pander and go along with this emotionalism that goes along with the fact that, well, this person can be whatever they want to be. And if they want to be, if a man wants to pretend to be a female, that we have to go along with that until that empirical reality slams into that emotional hope that what we would like to be true. And that's really what I was getting at, is it's not so much the actual physical contest or like, using being genetically enhanced in some way. It's the idea that we have to play along with this emotional hope that a woman and a man can be just as effective at the same things all the time. Again, it's a blank slate.
No, I understand that, and I do appreciate that. And I want to say thank you just right off the bat from like jumping into this dialogue, because I'm sure this is a whole fucking thing. So I see a couple of things where we're talking about like trends and then individual aspects, right? Like there's the trend is men will outperform in physical metrics, but then there are always going to be tons of individual women who can outperform the vast majority of men. It's like when you compare the best man to the best woman, you get those differences again. But there's tons of women marathon runners that are going to be, and I know that, we're not going to jump into that sort of stuff. When I get into the question is, we have things we claim to be empirical truth. And I, as a scientist, I agree with a lot of how that comes around, but I also don't believe in like absolutism. So to me, like, imagine a culture where biological sex and gender are fully separated. It's a whole fucking thing, right? And you have your, like, we talk about people with XX and we talk about people with XY. We acknowledge people who have, the variations of that from different things, because they can get interesting. But you have those kinds of movement along, like this is the masculine expression of that sort of thing. This is the female expression, the feminine expression of that kind of, where the gender and the sex are very, very separate concepts. At what point does the empirical truth of like it feels very heavy to me when we get to semantics, right? Where it's like one person is claiming this thing and another person is like, so, trans person, this is my gender, this is my sex. Another person is like, that's not your gender, that's not your sex, right? At what point is that a breakdown of language versus actuality, right? Like that person is a person. Everything we're using to describe that person is already an imperfect kind of like description of the ideas and the way we perceive the reality of the world, right? Like the word man and the word woman is already a wildly imperfect description of what's going on with people. And there are people who might meet the requirements or might not meet the requirements that are still kind of like.
See, I honestly, I think that the conflict in semantics right there is that you're speaking two different languages. One is the language of emotionalism and the other is the language of empiricism. And damn near every conflict you see, whether it's ideological or even like in intersexual dynamics, right? Men and women have most of the issues that you'll see between men and women. It's usually boils down to a conflict in who's speaking which language. So, for instance, the language of emotionalism is, well, this biological man is actually a woman. That because it's not empirically true. We look at this is the body, this is the features, this is we can look at the all the way down to the brain chemistry. We can look at even down to the molecular, the cellular level. We can say this is male and this is female. And by the way, Brandy, one of the things that I always use, I don't use the term traditional in anything that I write. I use conventional, because everybody has a different tradition, right? Traditional to me sounds like the language of emotionalism, right? Well, as a white male in the United States, my traditions are probably a lot different than somebody who lives in, Nairobi, Kenya, right? So I have
But conventions always change,
but the convention,
right?
So there are convention. When I talk about conventionally male, conventionally female, these are the aspects that are attributable to being biologically male, biologically female. So what I'm saying is, like, when we talk about traditional masculinity, well, traditional masculinity in Asia might be different than it is here in the United States. But conventional masculinity, meaning that these are the attributes and these are the characteristics that make a human male or a human female. That, I think, needs to be something that I use that for the same reason I'm talking to Rin here, is that's the language of empiricism versus the language of emotionalism. So if I am talking about stuff like, if I'm giving that, one of the things that people really hate about the red pill is, at least in my experience, is that when I talk about things in nuts and bolts, black and white terms, if I'm like, again, you can't give data without telling people how to feel about it. The feel about it part is, you're not speaking my emotional language. And by the way, it doesn't have to be liberal. It can also be conservative. They're just as emotional as liberals are as well. So it's the language of emotionalism versus the language of empiricism. And whenever you speak the language of empiricism, it always sounds like hate to the language of emotionalism, because it doesn't agree with, because emotionalism is usually what your ego investments are.
Well, I think it's okay to be bilingual.
I think so. I think so too, but most people have a very hard time making that distinction. They only speak the other.
No, fully. And again, this is something that it's really interesting as a scientist to have. It's like you'd be very trained on the idea of, like, speak to what's actually happening. Interpretation of data in the feelings and space of that nature. I'll continue to talk about this. This is a really fascinating subject to me, and I can get really into some of the, like, nuts and bolts again. That feels really like it can get
me and Rin argue about this all the time, I feel like.
Well, for sure, yeah.
Whenever I talk to, like, I got into it with, like, Michaela Peterson at one point, and she was like,
I watched that.
Left that argument. I didn't feel good about it. Good. I'm glad you didn't feel good about it, because it wasn't supposed to feel good. It was supposed to be educational.
She's a nepo baby. I can't take her seriously.
I know we're getting to the clock, so if we want to keep going, I'll try to stick.
Well, I probably should go. I don't want to like keep you guys too much longer. But Ren, another good topic would be metaphorical truth versus, like, empirical truth, objective truth, because that also goes back to emotionalism and empiricism.
Yep.
Well, it's funny that you guys. Oh, sorry. Like, you guys are having this conversation, and Ryan, it's interesting because, like, I'm all about objective stuff. So, like, I'm a mechanic for a living. So, like, for me, if the car's not broken when it comes to me, then it's like, well, what do you want me to do? Like, you have to tell me what I need to do to break the car so that way I can fix it. Nutrition stuff, when I'm reading a study, what's the study say? These people who ate this certain food for this certain period of time. Okay, well, there's an objective outcome that was worse for these people than the people who chose to not do the certain behavior.
So, I mean, there was a line in the comments about the biology doesn't care about semantics, but it's really interesting to me because, are you familiar with the genetics of chimerism?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Right. And so it's an interesting thing that we can have people with different genetics in different parts.
Remind me to tell you the story how I became familiar with that.
I hope it wasn't murder, because that's usually how it comes up.
Sorry, maybe not now.
Yeah, well, we'll just have you back on sometime.
Yeah, yes. No, can we 100%. This was awesome, and I love talking to you. I feel like I could talk to you for a very long time. It's very interesting because even though I'll admit it, I don't agree with everything, but I'm also very open and very interested in hearing what you have to say, because I don't think that you have a malignant intent. Like, I do think some people have. I think that you have good intentions, and I'm interested in kind of understanding and having other people understand what the red pill is, because like you said, there is a lot of confusion. I know for me, there was confusion at first, where when I first thought of people who called themselves red pill, I thought of the Andrew Tates, the Pearly things, like all of that. Like, I didn't know, like, they actually kind of co-opted a whole entire kind of concept
Mm-hmm.
for themselves. And I think that you know, it's enlightening. It's an enlightening experience. But
Are you a Ratchet 304?
but Rolo, give you where you want people to find you. What you want people to know about you right now.
You can find all of my books on Amazon. That's probably the best way to check me out. Just type in The Rational Male. That one is the first one. Start with people ask
I
me
know.
start with the first one. That's the one you have. Is there any like chronological order that you should read them in? No, it's just after the first one, all of the other books are based on the first one. So read that first, and then whatever your interests happen to be, like if it's religion or if, like Positive Masculinity is really about like parenting. But the first 2/3 of it is about parenting. So like just whatever you happen to be interested in, but they're all great reads. Again, that book that you have there is just turned 10. And let's see, you can find me on my channel, which is The Rational Male. I'm on at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern every Sunday. And if you want to talk to me direct, I am on Twitter. I am Rollo Tomasi at Rational Male. And I'm on Instagram, and you can see all kinds of pictures of my dog on there. So.
Kyle, do your thing.
Yeah, of course. My main podcast is called In Liberty and Health. I usually do 2 shows a week. My band is called A Common Crown, where you could hear our music coming out.
Trial of Ascension. We're on Spotify.
Well, listen, man. Listen, sometime you'll have
to yours too.
you'll have to have us out in Vegas. We'd love to do it. My bass player and singer actually got married out there. But yeah, A Common Crown will have a new single out hopefully next month. I've been saying that for a while, but I'm pretty sure it's gonna be next month. But yeah, In Liberty and Health, we do this every Thursday night, 5 till midnight for me as well on 8 p.m. Eastern time on Mondays. And you can find me on Twitter at KYLEMATOVCIK, Kyle Matovik on Twitter, and I'm on Facebook as well, but Twitter's where I'm most active.
Rin, I know you're
I'm Rin. I don't have anything to sell.
I know.
He's like a hermit.
Sorry. I'll get something. I'll write a book.
I'll write a book. I don't know. So I will actually be live again in about an hour, maybe sooner, who knows, to do some hot takes. I'm just gonna drink high noons and rant like I normally do. So if you want to come hang out and listen to me rant, I'll probably bring some friends. I don't know. We'll figure it out. You know, I live by the seat of my pants. But thank you all for hanging, and it was a fucking pleasure, Rolo. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Bye, guys.